if you start to make your goals and your sense of purpose about other people beyond yourself, your sense of well-being starts to rise, and your motivation and your capacity to endure hardship rise way up.
Welcome to Seven Figure Entrepreneur Podcast, the #1 podcast from you behind the scenes with real online earners. No fake gurus here. All right. And today we have the wonderful Todd Snyder. We also have the wonderful Tyler Devon. I think this is going to be an interesting one because Todd, I don't even know what to describe what you do. You're a performance coach that specializes in online business. Is that accurate?
That's pretty close. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a doctor of psychology who transferred out of the clinical work and over into the world of consulting with business owners. And I got sucked into the world of digital entrepreneurship just by nature of who found me and who found me after that through word of mouth. Yeah. And so primarily I work with digital entrepreneurs on accelerating goals. So it's that inner work, and it's also just the practical tools and strategies to get ourselves to level up and try to accomplish more by unlocking our true potential when it comes to productivity.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so cool. So yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, I think our listeners will really like this. We've had a lot of positive feedback, just people wondering about stuff like mindset and execution. One thing we've always preached, like success is an inside game first, and then it kind of happens in the real world, because if you don't have that inner game, it's just never going to happen for you. So I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of this. I'm excited to have you on.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting to be here.
I came across Todd from, I think, Peter Kell's video.
That's right. Yeah.
One of my friends who works with us, he was also friends with Peter Kell, and he spoke highly of you. So yeah, it's interesting trying to find someone that does what you do, man, because it's challenging. I dug deep for a while there, and yeah, I haven't found that many people that do it at all. So it's exciting to have you on. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to talk about like how you got into the online, the performance coaching in the online space? I know you sort of dabbled on it, like someone found you.
Yeah, that's probably a simplified explanation I gave you.
Yeah.
The truth is, I've been on a trajectory to land in this kind of work since I was about 16. But I took a circuitous route. And so 16, my parents worked overseas. I grew up partly in Rwanda, Africa, right as the genocide was happening out there. My dad took a job as a biology professor at a small town in Illinois. And I was one of those people they call a third cultured kid, where you kind of have like one culture, but then you live in another culture. And so you're not really either one, and you don't feel like you fit in very well. Coming back to the US, I had lived in a place with no TV, no electricity. We, running water was like occasional. We sometimes had snakes crawl out of the drain. Just, so it was a very isolated from the rest of my peers sort of environment. I did not fit in well. Dropped into a small farming town in Illinois. I didn't know how to relate to people. And I kind of had this internal implosion, this social anxiety, and this kind of feeling low and like, who am I? And how do I connect with people? And I came across a few books that had such a dramatic impact on me and just kind of allowed me to open up. And I was like, wow, what just happened to me? And I started trying to learn to understand that more. And I realized, oh, that's what they call psychology. I want to learn more about that, because whatever that was that just happened to me, I want to be able to help other people with that kind of thing. So that's where I went and kind of followed the traditional path, majored in psychology, and in college went on to do a master's degree and then doctoral degree at Baylor University, Department of Psychology and Neuroscience. So I had, some of the guys that invent the drugs teaching me, some of the guys that do the clinical work teaching me. Came out of that, went straight into private practice out in the community, working with people, doing psychological assessments, IQ testing people with memory problems, that kind of thing. And then also doing counseling, help people with depression, anxiety, marriage issues. And then I started thinking, yeah, but what I really love is the kind of stuff that I discovered at 16, which was a little bit more focused on goals and motivation and adopting that internal locus of control, where instead of being in that victim mindset, you say, well, wait a minute, if I don't like the circumstances I'm in, what can I do to change that? And that taking that internal locus of control had such a powerful impact on me that I was looking for ways to get back into that. So there's sort of a rhythm you have to follow to do clinical work. You know, if someone's really depressed, for example, you can't just say, okay, rah, rah, you know, we're going to do this together, go. And then just like pedal to the metal. Like that just doesn't work. You have to work at the pace of the person. And so I was having this really strong desire, this itch to sprint with people. And then just because some people were aware of how I did do work with people on weight loss and just motivation and goal setting and stuff, I started having a few people in business and or sports come in and ask for help. And then the word spread from that. But then one day I was actually sitting in my office and I had a no-show, somebody's car had broken down or they were sick or something. I was like, I'm sitting here in this office with no windows. My family's at home. I'm just wasting time. There's got to be some way I can monetize these empty hours where I'm just sitting here. So I started dabbling, and I found somebody talking about selling information on the internet. So I was like, oh, maybe I could do that while I'm sitting here, you know, on these empty hours. And so I put out an info product on social anxiety, and pretty soon it was paying my car payment. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then somebody invited me onto one of those telesummit type things, and that led to a bunch of other people inviting me to come talk to various entrepreneurs about some things. And from there, it was just me trying to keep up with the demand. So yeah, it's
Good
I
problem to
realized,
have.
what would you say, Tyler?
I said a great problem to have.
It did feel like a blessing. Yeah, to be able to just have work to do that felt very meaningful. But I also just recognized, like, these are my people. When I started working with entrepreneurs, I was like, these people think like me. Like they want to sprint and they have these big goals and they just want to go after things. And so that's how I got pulled into this work.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's
What
awesome.
So I'm kind of curious, man, like from your experience, seeing people who struggle, you know, to even get started versus people who are kind of like more successful, what kind of differences have you noticed in the way that they operate, and the way they think, and the way they act?
Yeah, that's been one of the advantages that I've had is it's kind of like living several lifetimes when you have 20 people all doing different things, but you give them advice and you see what some people do. And in some cases they tell me, you know, this is what I'm going to do. This is my philosophy. And then I get to watch how those decisions unfold over time. And the distinctions that they're very powerful, very clear. I can't say, Tyler, that there's like one thing, you know, it's like some people are capable of assimilating a lot of data, filtering it down to like, here's the active ingredients of success. These are the things that lead to success. And I think that that's a skill that if you actively develop it, it allows you to succeed in just about any field, whatever you're trying to accomplish. And so if I know this is sort of a roundabout answer, but I would say it's the people who are actively doing that, who are looking at themselves and seeking information from the outside world, from experts, from listening to podcasts like this one. And they're trying to assimilate, they're trying to filter. There's data coming in, and then they're actively working on that filtering process to say, I only have so many hours in the day. And so I know that there's going to be active ingredients. There's the 80-20, there's Pareto's principle working for me or against me. How can I filter down to what really matters? And then you've got to take that, whatever you figure out about kind of in general, on average, this seems to work. And you have to filter that through what you know about yourself. So there's some people that they realize, like for me, it's distraction, like Facebook and or having notifications on my phone. I won't get anything done. A lot of entrepreneurs come to me when they have this experience of, no, I swear I worked my tail off this week. But when you ask me, what did I accomplish? I'm just like, I couldn't tell you. Like, I don't feel like I really made any progress. And those people, sometimes it's that they are distracted and their attention gets pulled away. And each time it's like when you spend like $25 on your credit card 100 times in the month, and then you get the bill at the end of the month and you're like, there's no way I spent $7,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
Then you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, I did spend that. And I think that's how it is with our time and our attention. A lot of the times we just don't even realize that the 7 minutes here and there adds up to a whole work week if you don't manage that. Now you take that and you compound that common experience that all people have in any job. You compound that by being an entrepreneur, somebody who has a team, for example, pinging you on Slack. And now you have this sense of pressure of, okay, I hired that person. They're sitting there waiting for me to get back to them. And they can't really work on the project that I told them to work on until I get back to them. And I'm spending my money to pay them by the hour, and you have this pressure. So then now you're on Slack all the time, responding to your team or your phone messages or whatever method you. And I think it causes people to get to this point where they feel like I'm stuck. I'm just jammed. I'm locked in. I can't breathe, but I can't see how to get out of this. And you might call it drowning in your own success. You might call it just poor planning, but in whatever case, it's not aligned with what they really set out to do. It's not aligned with the goals they truly have for their own personal life or their business.
And probably, I imagine too, it doesn't really play off like their strengths as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's a good.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was just thinking about what you said, the strengths aspects. There are some philosophies that revolve around that so much. So identify what it is that's your unique ability, and really make sure that you eliminate, automate, delegate all of those things that don't fit with that, so you can then focus on the things that are really your true best things that you can bring, that unlocks value, that then makes your business
totally. It's interesting. We have people kind of hit us up all the time and they say, I want to have an online business, but I have no idea what I should do. Could you tell me? And the short answer, I'm like, I can't really tell you, because I think where you're going to win is based off your strengths. And one of the best favors one of my mentors has ever done for me is he asked me what my top 3 strengths were. And then he looked at his watch and see how fast I could list them off. And he's like, if it takes more than 10 seconds, he's like, you don't know. Because he's like, it's so important you know your strengths, because you'll win on your strengths, not on your losses. And I find kind of the role I'm in now is it's really about developing leaders on the team and developing them off their strengths so that they can kind of bring their best value and their best game every single day. So it's been an interesting journey, man. But like the psychological aspect of this whole thing really plays into that too. As far as like when entrepreneurs come to you, I imagine they're kind of coming to you when they need a Band-Aid. So they're in a reactive state versus a proactive state. Is that accurate?
That's a good question. I've been trying to figure that out myself. For my own branding, I tried to figure that out, and I realized, unless I force this into a choice, it's really almost 50-50. I have some people that come to me and just say, I want to be the absolute best I can be. People like Peter, who publicly talk about, I don't publicly claim my clients, but if they publicly claim me, then I'll mention it. So, Peter will say, the best golfers in the world hire a coach. The best basketball players in the world will have a coach, because you need that outside feedback. And so if you're saying I'm already amazing, it's not that I need a Band-Aid, it's that I'm going for being the best I can possibly be. And I know that my internal mindset, if I don't have a rhythm built into my week where I stop at some point and I have somebody there who's a thinking partner to help me think through, okay, what are my goals? Am I still going for them? Do I have any internal baggage, whether it's just stress buildup or starting to lose my sense of abundance mentality, whatever it is that has supported their progress in the past? If that starts to diminish, we want to recognize it quickly. And part of what I do too is decision-making coaching. And the reason for that is because in entrepreneurship, you don't have a boss. So you have so many hundreds more decisions to make. That decision fatigue can be real. And sometimes you need someone else to create a scaffolding, a structure. This is, for me, how I think about the work that I do, is I'm creating scaffolding for someone who's already smart, who knows way more about their business than I do. But I'm creating the scaffolding that allows, similar to a bricklayer who stands on the scaffolding so they can lay the bricks a little bit higher than they would have been able to just standing on their own 2 feet. So I create that structure for thinking, and allows that person to think at a higher level than they would if they were just sitting by themselves in their office. And that thinking process, that decision, is so crucial to productivity, because if you have an internal civil war going on, you're not sure, you have 5 different ways you could take your company this next quarter, and you're not entirely sure which one, then it doesn't matter how much I improve your systems and your delegation or your time management. But none of that matters if you're not even sure where you're going in the first place. And so that's why we always start with decision making. And so that's another reason why some of the people that come to me, they're not really seeking a Band-Aid so much as they're saying, I know that if I consistently work through these decisions with someone that creates that scaffolding, I'll have greater certainty. And certainty is one of those things that just creates productivity. If you know 100%, like, I am going to do that, you work at such a faster pace than if you're like, like, I don't know, there's pros and cons here, and you just haven't fully decided. Or even worse yet, you kind of are pretending like you've decided, but there's some part of you that you might call it a subconscious, but it's not really, it's more of just part of your conscious thinking that you're resisting it still. And so that's where you have to make that choice. You know, if you ask me, like, Todd, do you want to make a difference in the world? I'd say yes. And if you ask me, well, Todd, do you like to just kind of relax and go with the flow and you know, have relaxing Saturdays and not try to accomplish a lot? I'd say yes. You know, I've got to decide those competing motivations. They're both real for me, but I have to decide, how am I going to align myself behind one in such a way that it brings about real world results? Otherwise, I'm just spinning my wheels, some spinning this direction, some spinning that direction, and I go nowhere.
Totally. Interesting, man.
Interesting.
I really see the value in what you're talking about, because like as an entrepreneur, especially an online entrepreneur, we can almost do anything. Meaning, you know, once you have the ability to generate a lead or generate a sale online, you can almost sell anything. And so that opportunity for choice is massive. Where if, you know, if you're a chiropractor, you know, you're going to crack backs or you're going to specialize in that. But like when you just have the power of the internet in your hand, there's just so much you can do. So that's really awesome how you bring, like, really, it sounds like, help people find their clarity. You know, the other thing that you said that I loved was the sense of abundance, man. Could you talk more about that? Because that's something I actively think about.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Tyler, but for me, I was first exposed to that concept through Stephen Covey's book, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talked about it in the context of looking for win-win in business. And he talked about how successful people are always, instead of that win-lose kind of interaction, they're always looking for the win-win. And some people have evolved that into the win-win-win, you know, where you win as the business owner, you know, everybody involved gets to win. And that idea of, instead of how can I get a bigger slice of the pie and so you get less, let's just see how we can make a pie making machine.
Yeah.
There's more pie than anybody. For me personally, I know that the difference is tremendous in just in my quality of life, not even talking about the output, you know, on a productivity level. Quality of life is higher when you have an abundance mindset because you have less fear. One of the things I found is that if you can reduce fear for people, they make better decisions. People do pretty well if you can just get rid of fear. And especially, I don't know when exactly you guys are going to air this, how long your time schedule is, but at this moment that we're recording it, you know, there's a lot of people talking about, do we have a recession coming? And it's amazing to me how I see entrepreneurs who have proven time and time again that they can create value out of nothing very quickly, and how they're like retreating into these mindsets of how am I going to survive this, and I better prepare for the coming winter. And I find myself thinking, what, you're going to be the person that pulls us out of the recession. Like you're the guys that create jobs. Like you don't need to be thinking that way. But it's so easy to get pulled into that. And so
absolutely.
we're vulnerable to it.
Yeah. That's interesting. I never saw it in the book or read it in the book, but it's something I've actively noticed within myself. Anytime I even feel a sense of like lack, I really try to like double down and do the opposite, because the abundance is where the opportunity really lies. And like one thing that always strikes me, and I was actually talking to a friend about this earlier today, and I was saying, I'm like, time and money has no relationship. Like there's no direct correlation in like, you can only make X amount of dollars in this much time. Like you hear about, and this is obviously an exaggerated example, and this isn't accurate, but people are familiar with this. I think it was Elon Musk when he signed that deal with Hertz. His net worth increased billions of dollars that day alone, billions of dollars in one day, because now his Tesla stocks, you know, it was soaring. And it blows my mind how fast wealth can be created to the magnitude of billions in literally hours. So there's no lack of money. There's no lack of opportunity. It's just really understanding that, like, you know, that the opportunity is there. But like, I feel like abundance thinking and a sense of abundance is all key in all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. One of it feels like the opposite side of that. Pascal, I think it was Blaise Pascal that talked about that two-sided coin, you know, that there's some truths in life where you can't fully understand it unless you understand the opposing opposite.
Oh yeah.
Like seeming opposites. And yet, unless you have both of those, then you don't have a full fleshed out understanding of truth or the reality of it.
I like that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And so I definitely am a proponent of that abundance mindset. And yet a lot of the work on a day-to-day basis that I do with entrepreneurs has to do with constraints and bottlenecks. And, that's because I've found that coming back to that 80-20, the Pareto's principle of, if you can identify that bottleneck or that constraint in your business that is holding you back from whatever your next level goal is, that unlocks a tremendous capacity to use all of your creativity and brainstorming and resources, connections, cash flow, delegation skills to break past that constraint, to break past that bottleneck. And it unlocks a whole new layer of the kind of thing you're talking about, Tyler, where it's like, I thought that we could only incrementally increase our profits, but there's these huge leaps that can take place.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one friend, his online business, first year did $1 million, second year did 4 million, third year did 30 million. And it's, you know what I mean? It's just crazy to see that explosion. And he didn't add more employees, maybe like 1 or 2, but it wasn't a function of more people. It was just getting really good at what he does, and seeing that the opportunity is there, being in markets where the opportunity is, because obviously that's important, but it's incredible the growth you can have.
Yeah, right.
Interesting. So I think that I'd like to touch on like more of like the personal side of things, in a sense that like, so what if so originally, just full clarity, I went looking for a performance coach because I was like, I'm good at what I do and I can get stuff done, but I really have to force myself to do it. Like there's no like easy flip of the switch, like I gotta go. So I started being like, okay, well, I'm going to hire a coach to work through this and figure out what holds me back, so on and so forth. So, and I know for a fact that there's a lot of people out there that know what they need to do. They know they know their industry in and out. And then sometimes they just don't want to fucking do it, but they know they need to do it. Do you run into people like that a fair bit? Is it common? Is it not common? And even do you have solutions for those people?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic, Gabe. And definitely the answer is yes. That's probably the other 50%. It's not even really the other, because everybody to some degree deals with that.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why some people, I have one client who asked me for a little bit of help with that. And, he was, in the time we worked together, we took him from 5 million a month to $17 million in a month of net profits.
Wow.
And so he was very successful. Yeah. And he was one of those people that just was very driven in a lot of ways and was willing to take risks and just accomplish things. And yet that was still sometimes what we talk about, which is, it sounds weird, it's like, well, how is that still affecting people? And that's because we live in these bodies with DNA and the structures that some of which are designed to conserve energy. And one of the things that can happen to entrepreneurs is, because there's no limit, there's no one that says, well, you can't work overtime today, we don't have it in the budget, go home. Sometimes we think, well, my goal is to hit that number by end of this quarter, so I'm going to just work a little bit longer. We go from 10 hours to 12 and 14-hour workday. And what happens is sometimes subconsciously you start to put on the brakes on your motivation. You're not doing this consciously. I mean, it is a energy conserving sort of thing, that just like if I ask you to run a marathon, you're not going to start out sprinting, right? Or if you do, you're going to start slowing yourself down pretty soon, because like, oh, I've got hours left to run. And so you're going to hold back energy. And so one of the things that we try to do is create cascading series of deadlines that are more like sprints, so that we can sort of trick our psychology and biology into releasing that break, so that, I'm sprinting to this point. And this is where a constraint can actually unlock greater productivity, is if you say, I think it's we call it Parkinson's law, that work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion. Like, the right word for that, or phrase.
Yeah, it's like if you want to clean your house, it'll take a day or it could take a week, whatever you kind of choose.
Exactly. Yeah, but and that's true partly just because of choosing, okay, which parts of the house am I going to prioritize? But even with mental work, like if you're trying to write a blog article or come up with a new headline for your ad copy, in that context, it seems like it shouldn't be the case that you can shrink time and accomplish more. And yet we find that you actually can think faster, because you take off the brakes. If you say, I'm only giving myself these 35 minutes to come up with 3 headlines that are going to beat the old control. And so if we can use that, I mean, that's just one tool, that's one tactic, Gabe, that I might employ with at a deeper level. Though there's the narrative that's running in the back of your mind that's going to influence to what degree you come to work with motivation. Have you ever had that experience where you have a flight at 4 a.m. the next morning and you set your alarm for a couple hours earlier than you'd normally get up? And then you wake up the next morning, you wake up at like 2 a.m. and then you wake up at 2:15 and you just keep waking up because your brain is anticipating what's coming next. It's the same thing that makes it hard for kids to sleep the night before Christmas or the night before they're going to Disney World or something. It's this anticipation, this excitement. I once sat through a seminar with David Burns, probably one of the most famous psychiatrists in the world. He wrote the book Feeling Good. And he was talking about patients with bipolar disorder, meaning not just depression, but you also have mania where your energy goes too high and you just have this low need for sleep sometimes. And he was talking about how he himself has experienced that when he was bidding for some coins on eBay. And he was so excited to see if he was going to win these coins that he couldn't sleep at night. He's like, what's happening there? Is that a chemical change? Is that an electric change? He was talking us through some of the ways that our brain is more electric than it is chemical, despite the fact that most of our interventions are chemical based. But in any case, the point is that we have energy released based on the narrative that's running in the back of your mind. So if the narrative is, I have to wake up early tomorrow, it's different. And so here's one thing I've noticed, Gabe. This is a pretty common. People come to me once they've had a certain level of success. The pressure is off. Technically, I wouldn't have to work another day for the rest of my life. Now I can't get myself to even care enough to do the basics. And their motivation drops. What's happened? It's the narrative in the back of your mind. It's changed from I have to do this to survive, and you've got some fear level motivation, to now it's kind of optional. Maybe I should do it. Maybe that's kind of nice out today, or I'm just going to read this. And so that narrative, we can change that by getting you more excited about goals that we then bring closer in time. So there's this thing called temporal distortion. When it comes to motivation and goals, humans are very impacted by time. So the further out a reward is or a consequence, the less impact it has on my immediate motivation. And this has been researched, for example, with people who believed they were being set up to go see the dentist, who had a fear of the dentist. If you tell them like, oh, they have an opening in 2 months, should I tell them to take it? People say yes. If you say they have an opening today, do you want to get it? It's at 2 p.m. They say no, because that consequence, the pain that they fear, is very close. So they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. But if it's further away, it seems like, oh yeah, in theory, there's some pain out there somewhere. And so I'm just not going to worry about that. Same thing with motivation for positive stuff. So if, let's say I'm trying to lose weight, I go downstairs, I've decided to swear off sugar stuff. My wife has left out a big chunk of moist chocolate cake on the counter, and I'm just walking past it. I'm like, immediately what happens in my mind is I'm visualizing the choice. If we split reality, one is I go past it and I get a drink of water and go back to work. The other is I think, oh, I could eat half of that cake, and I'm mentally simulating that possible future, right? And I can taste that cake in my mouth, and it's immediate. It's like 30 seconds or less away to get that reward. And so it feels very powerful and strong, versus my desire to walk out with my pants fitting well. That's like, 3 or 6 months away. And so that reward has a much less pull on my behavior right now. So to overcome that, again, what we do is we try to bring distant rewards closer through intense visualization and through, again, a cascading series of deadlines that all lead to a bigger goal. Sometimes people think about long-term goals, and they'll ask me, should I set a long-term goal, like a 3-year goal, or should I do a short-term goals? And I say, we've got to do both, and we have to align them so that your short-term goals clearly lead to your long-term goals. And we want to rehearse those mentally very often, so that the strength of the short-term goals that seem like just tasks, that they never become tasks. Like Tony Robbins calls it getting emotionally fit. And that's part of what that means. It's like getting to where you're emotionally fit enough to generate the motivation now for these small tasks by connecting it to the deeper meaning, the why, the thing that's really driving you to go after the longer term more meaningful goal in the distant future.
Interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool.
Time for some time travel, bro.
Yeah. It's funny because like I feel like creating goals for me have never really been like a main thing, because I feel like I create them for myself. So I'm like, oh, whatever. Like I think it's easier for me to let myself down than to let other people down. So lately what I've been doing is just making other people hold me accountable for shit. And people relying on me, because then I won't let other people down. So I try to tie those two together when I know that it's an important task. And it really helps me get shit done. So
Awesome.
Yeah, that makes sense. Reminds me of Evan Pagan's strategy. I think he called it the inevitability method, where he wants to write a chapter of his book. So he agrees for a month from now, he's going to do a speech on that topic at someone's mastermind event or something. And now it's like, I'm going to get it done because I'm going to be on that stage and I'm not going to just have nothing to say. And so
that's
smart.
Kicks into gear and he's writing and he's like motivated. He's tying it to, like you said, someone else that cares about an outcome or.
It's funny how as entrepreneurs, we're always like finding ways to like just push ourselves further with like, for lack of a better term, psychology hacks. You know what I mean? Like how do we make ourselves produce more or have more energy? I recently joined the strategic coach program. Yeah, and we went into Kobe reports and stuff like that. And one thing that they said that I found was kind of interesting was so based on your Kobe report, it's basically, you know, how would you normally handle things? How do you operate? And so like I have a high quick start, so I'll start things very fast. But then other things, like once they're in motion and stuff, I'm not as consistent. That's not my thing. So one, they were saying, you know, find someone that is to balance you out. But then the other thing was, you know, how come you think it's like this? Like, how come you think, you know, you're so high in a quick start where someone else is? And kind of what they thought, which I thought was kind of interesting. And it came back to like how much energy you have. Like there's certain things that almost like produce energy. Like for me, discussing new ideas, meeting people. Like I met a guy today who is really big in the boxing world, and he was asking about building a digital product. Like that was very, you know, that created energy for me. Where if one of my guys is like, hey, do you want to go through accounting? Like that's the last thing I'd probably want to do today. So it like sucks energy. So it's kind of interesting how it goes into like, you know, I'll make certain choices based on that too, like subconsciously, just based on how much of a mental drain I think something will be versus like invigorating.
Yeah, that novelty effect is powerful.
Yeah.
And it drives a lot of our dopamine system is based on novelty. And so it's really hard for anything that's systematic and routine to hold the same level of interest for us. You know, like our accounting, it's unlikely you're going to discover some amazing, cool thing in there, you know, versus meeting somebody. What could we create if we did this digital project together? And that's, again, that comes back to a common thing I work with entrepreneurs on is the shiny object syndrome. So many people could be so much more successful if they weren't trying to do 17 things at once. Or worst case scenarios, you start something, you get about 1/3 of the way in, and then you see this other idea and you're like, that's kind of cool. So you start that, and then you're 1/3 of the way through, and then you think that's kind of cool. And you just do that for years. And I've seen entrepreneurs do this for years before they start working with me, because they've gotten to a place where they can. This is one of the downsides of the Tim Ferriss sort of lifestyle, where you create something where you've got this automatic machine that's printing money for you. And now you don't technically, like, I should show up at the office, a few things I should check on, but everything after that is growth. And now because of that, it's bought you enough time to where you build some really bad habits of just never really getting anything done, because you're just sort of testing and there's no pressure. And so I encourage people to put the pressure on now so that life doesn't do it for you. Similar to when I used to help people quit smoking, doing clinical work, I would sometimes tell them, look, you're going to quit smoking either way. It's just a question, are you going to do it while dying of cancer in a hospital? Because they don't let you smoke there. You can't smoke in a hospiel. So are you going to go through withdrawal there while you have lung cancer, or do you want to do it now and maybe never get lung cancer? And so I would say, you know, let's end the shiny object syndrome now. Let's act as if you have a deadline, and then commit. Like, treat that deadline like it's real. Because if you don't have that level of commitment to yourself, you quickly start, if you can't trust yourself to follow through on a commitment to yourself, then you've you've kind of created a scenario where nothing you say to yourself is real anymore. But if you
Mhm.
treat it like it is, like a commitment to myself is just as real as a commitment to my doctor to be at that appointment, or to my wife to meet her on a date at this time. If you don't treat yourself, your own commitments at that level, then you lose trust. And so your commitments become meaningless. But if you really truly commit to say, all right, I'm going to have one thing, I call it one goal of money. This is one of the strategies I work with on everyone is finding the bottleneck and finding one goal of money. Start with the one goal of money, meaning instead of 17 things that all might eventually come to fruition, let's identify the smallest thing we can do that's going to increase the revenue that's coming into the company. And as soon as that's actually generating revenue, or it could be a system or process that increases efficiency internally, but
Mhm.
generally speaking, the idea is creates more revenue. Once you've done that, it's a snowball. You can roll that cash flow into being more productive to hit the next goal faster, because now you can hire more people, you can bring in the best experts, you can buy someone else's templates. And so it allows you to hit the next shiny object that was in the waiting. Instead of doing all 17 at once, you choose the one thing. And so if you can get yourself to stop doing the shiny object indefinitely by saying, I have this deadline and I have to finish this one goal of money by that point. And then we work backwards from there and we say, okay, well, if that's the case, then where do I have to be in 1 month? Where do I have to be in 1 week? And by working backwards and committing to each of those layers, you've created a different dynamic that changes that narrative, Gabe, that I was talking about a moment ago, where internally now the narrative is, I'm not going to let myself down. I choose a destiny where I am the person who's going to accomplish amazing things. If I'm honest with myself about what I really want, and I say that's what it is, and I know that this is like the stepping stone, I've got to make this time count because I've made that commitment, instead of, yeah, someday maybe I'll be that person when the pressure is on. And so that cascading series of deadlines activates something in us that is very different than if we just kind of have vague notions of, yeah, eventually I'll get around to doing something cool.
That's interesting, Gabe, because you're good under pressure, right? I know I certainly am.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah, I to the point where I think I'm going to start leveraging it more to myself, because I don't really put myself under pressure too much. But yeah, whatever I've done, like on stage speaking or anything like that, like I literally write my like speech out and talking points and everything like within like the last few days, or like day even. And it works for me, honestly. Like I can get stuff done and I crush with that. But like the procrastination to that point is just like, I also excel at that. One thing that you said that was interesting that I kind of want to touch on and kind of get your input on is you were talking about the commitments to yourself. And I did a lot of research on like commitments to yourself and like being true to your word to yourself. And I found, and what I figured out too, is like, you're much more confident in yourself if you achieve those commitments that you made to yourself versus like letting them go and like not committing to them or not finishing them, or just not being true to yourself in terms of like those words. So what I find is people that say they're going to do a lot of stuff, and including myself in this situation, and like I've worked through a lot of shit to get to this point, but if you keep letting yourself down over and over again, it tanks your confidence to make you think that you can't achieve shit. At least what I've found. But if it's really easy to flip the switch on that, because if you stick to your commitments to yourself, then your confidence just boosts right back up and you're back in the game and you're on top of the world. And and I feel like it's a difference. You play more offense when you are more confident, I feel, versus when you just let yourself down all the time. You're constantly playing defense in a sense, in terms of like life. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you've nailed it. That's the truth. And that's why, I don't know if either of you have ever read BJ Fogg's book, Tiny Habits, but he talks about, you want to start small and just completely master this one small piece of the habit. So you need you need some sort of cue to remind you to do it. You need the ability to do it. You need the motivation. It's basically those are the only 3 things you need to start a new habit. I combine that with Nir Eyal. Nir Eyal's the author of Indistractable. And he has this concept where it's like you take something that you're going to work on, like a new habit, and you're 100% extreme with yourself about hitting that one goal, even if it's very small, and then you grow it over time. He calls it progressive extremism. So I might say, I'm going to time box 10 minutes of my day for this coming week. for those 10 minutes, I'm going to be 100% compliance with my intention. Instead of doing what some people do is they say, I'm going to go all out with productivity, and they start, and then they break all of these promises they made to themselves. And it does the opposite of what you just said. Instead of building a momentum of trust in their own commitment, they've built this sense of, this new narrative now says, yeah, I pretty much can't do this productivity thing. And so instead, what we do is we do progressive extremism using the tiny habits concept of, all right, let's find one thing that we can 100% improve and be consistent with. And then once that's a habit, it's your ability now has grown. So that no longer takes much motivation because it's just so easy. So now we just build on that a little bit and keep building until you look back at yourself 3 or 6 months later and you're like, I don't even recognize this person I've become. How do I get so much done? How am I so efficient? I'm using all of the best peak productivity habits.
Interesting.
And it seems like so simple when you lay it out like that, but just I know it's not.
But then you wrap all the emotions you're feeling into it too, and it becomes
all the bullshit you tell yourself constantly.
Yeah. It's interesting. We even see that on like Gabe, you could probably relate to some of the media buyers on the team.
Yeah, I was gonna dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, please feel free.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we see it too. Like we have guys where they have like, and even people from my course. So I sell a course that does lead gen, or that teaches lead generation. And like, I know the guys pretty well, and who buy it, a majority of them. And it's funny, man. It's like when you don't have success doing it, it's almost like, because sorry, I'll go back a little bit. Our industry's up and down, and like an ad that you have working one day can crush, like, you know, this can crush and make tons of money. And then just like one day it stops, and then you're back to reinventing the wheel. But I find when guys lose over and over again doing the same stuff, and I don't want to say that it's not their fault, because it is their fault, but sometimes there's other things in motion, like Facebook's being a pain in the ass or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But I have conversations with these dudes who are down and out and they haven't made any money, and they're just like, they almost feel like they don't know what the fuck to do. So they start digging deep on like certain like nuances of advertising that really don't matter. You know, they're digging so deep into the data, so deep into all this stuff, when really it's just like, you just got to keep doing what you did originally, man, and eventually something will stick. But I guess to my point is like mentally, they think they suck. They think that like, oh, it's over. Like, am I just a fraud? I don't know what the fuck I'm doing anymore. But really it's just a confidence thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Brian Moran and Michael Lennington, the authors of the 12-week year, they say there's really only 2 reasons a business effort is going to fail. It's either a bad plan or a bad execution of that plan. And in their opinion, most of the time, like 80% of the time, is poor execution.
That's interesting. I love concise stuff like that.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, it really does. It kind of boils it down. I tried to think my way around. I was like, oh, is there any situation where that's not true? And I couldn't think of one.
No, it's pretty dead on.
Yeah, but that randomness element that you're bringing up, where you do all the right things, but the randomness of life causes you to feel like you're failing. And that then causes your motivation to drop. That's real. And again, when you're in entrepreneurship and you're at the cutting edge, you're the ship that's cutting through ice as you move. There's no path to follow. It's really easy to question and say, wait, am I doing things right? Now, in this case, though, it sounds like maybe someone who's a performance-based person and so they've been given a path and they've been told these are the best practice systems that work. Just follow this plan. We know the plan is good, so we just need you to keep executing. Part of the trick there is to make sure that you're really clear with people about the difference between lead indicators and lag indicators. So if I'm trying to lose weight, my lag indicator is the thing that shows me like, now I've succeeded, and I cannot directly control that. If you say, Todd, go lose weight, like, what does that mean? Like, I can't just directly lose weight. All I can do is control the things that lead to that. Those are the lead indicators, like exercising or following a good nutrition plan. And so it's important for me to still track my weight. I should weigh myself and track, okay, today the scale says I'm pressing this much gravity down on planet Earth, but that's just the lag. What's more important is check, did I follow my nutrition plan today? And I check that off. Did I do my physical workout today? Check that off, because those are things I can actually control. So you want to, with this kind of scenario where you already know the plan works, you want to help people to really focus more on the lead indicator. Be like, did you spend the time? Did you access the things that jumpstart your creativity? Did you go through the filters for best practices? If you've done that, today was a success. Reality will eventually, statistically, it's just a matter of time until that proves to be a working strategy, because we know that one works. If there's some element of we don't know yet, then that's a slightly different ball game. But
I love
that's
that,
one of
man.
the things.
It
Sorry?
reminds me of like a math question, where it's like, what are the functions of a successful formula? It's like, in your weight loss example, it could be, drink 4 liters of water a day, plus 10,000 steps, plus, this will equal weight loss over time. As long as you know what the functions are, which in our industry, it's like testing. Testing is probably the number one thing you can do. Like a new ad will solve every single one of your, an amazing ad can solve every single one of your problems. It'll solve your tracking issue. It'll solve your quality issue. It'll solve every single problem that you could possibly have. One damn good ad. And every media buyer knows that, but it's so easy to lose focus of that when like things aren't working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's cool. One more topic that I kind of want to dig in, and like Tyler and I talk about this all the time. And it's directly related to some people that we've worked with in the past on our teams and so on and so forth. But Tyler and I believe, and Tyler, sorry if I'm speaking for you, but I feel that like there's both been times in our industry when we don't love it, where we're just like, why are we doing this? And sometimes the money's just like not enough to push you forward. But we're strong believers in you can learn to love different parts of your business to make it exciting again, if that makes sense. So what do you think about that? And like, how would you get someone back into loving their business that they may think they don't love anymore? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Tyler, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I've definitely found kind of like, one big part of our business is sending email. Like, how passionate could you actually be about sending email? But it, like, believe it or not, man, I am, but there's definitely times when I've fallen out of that. So I can definitely relate to that for sure.
We see it on the media buyer side too. Like, they're just like, why am I doing this? Like,
oh yeah,
do I need this money? Like,
not even that, like, what else could I be spending this time doing? I don't really love it.
Yeah, it's true. Sometimes having options ends up making people less happy. This is a strange thing that's emerged from the subjective well-being research and psychology field. For those who study that, oddly enough, they found some of the happier people are in Cuba, who are essentially given a job that you're told this is what you're going to do, and you don't have any choice. And so you'd think, most of us Americans would think, oh, that'd make me miserable if someone told me like, you're going to sit here and roll cigars and that's your job. And yet, if you don't have choice, the human mind tends to start to find what's interesting about whatever you have. And so that's, again, one of the things that tortures entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That never crossed my mind. I've actually been to Cuba, and like, I had that same thought. Like, there's something about the pride that Cuban people have, regardless of their current situation.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
So, I think one of the other psychological principles that's at play here is progress. And so if you look at what causes us to be happy, we need to have some sort of sense of there's something meaningful that we care about and we're making progress toward it. And it can be just very small progress. So you could have somebody that this progress piece is very essential to us feeling happy in our work. And so you could be somebody who, like Elon Musk, who's trying to figure out how to invent robots to help in the kitchen. And that's like, oh, it's so cool. Or we're trying to get to Mars or whatever. It's just massive goal. And it seems like, man, I can see where he'd get passion from being like the person who has the financial and manpower resources to do a moonshot like that. But you could have that same progress happening for a grandmother who's in a nursing home, who's just working on trying to finish knitting a pair of socks for her newborn great grandchild or whatever, and it feels like, oh yeah, I made some progress. It's starting to look good. She can derive that exact same amount of happiness as Elon Musk because it matters to her and she feels like she's making progress. And so it brings us kind of, it's similar to gamification, in the sense that if I go play video games, I bought one of those Oculuses, from Facebook.
Very
And
cool.
man,
Nice.
it's way more fun than I ever expected. Like I
Yeah.
immediately started getting sucked in. I was like, I'm gonna have to limit myself on this. This is too fun. And but the more I play it, the more I care, and the progress starts to matter to me. Like, did I rank up? Did I level up in this game? But if I forget about it for a week, then it starts to drift away, and I start to care about whatever is the new thing. So if I'm monitoring my stats on something, I start to care about that more. And so that's one of the reasons why you want to set goals, and that are artificial goals, where you say, if I can just get to this next level and have it close enough in time to where you can almost taste it. You're like, I'm almost there. And then connect that to a more meaningful sense of purpose. So, I mean, the truth is, none of us actually want money. We just want the things that money can buy, right? So money sitting in our bank accounts doesn't do anything for us. It's what can we turn that into? And for some people, it's security. For some people, it's the sense of I have now options. For some people, it's literally like, I need that so that I can get a car, so I can get my kids to school. You know, whatever those needs are that we translate it into. Again, if you've met all of your own personal needs for security and the sense of adventure and stuff, that's where it really does help to start tapping into other people. And this is not just sort of feel good spiritual kind of thinking. It's also backed by psychological science, that if you start to make your goals and your sense of purpose about other people beyond yourself, your sense of well-being starts to rise, and your motivation and your capacity to endure hardship rise way up. So if you think about like Viktor Frankl's the classic story of this psychiatrist who was stuck in a Nazi concentration camp, and he noticed that people who didn't have that sense of purpose died from the hardship at a much higher rate than those who could find some reason why they needed to survive. And if that was about other people, you had a far greater chance of, I mean, it influences our immune system, and influences literally the strength that you're able to generate in a muscle if you connect to like some deeper purpose that is beyond yourself.
Dude, that's very interesting.
That's very cool.
One thing that's always worked for me in the past, anytime I've kind of felt less motivated, was like I've created myself into this like crazy scientist. And the scientist, what does a scientist do? A scientist creates tests. I'm like, okay, like what kind of like things can I test if I'm feeling unmotivated or I'm not seeing the wins? And then I kind of get excited about those tests, and I want to see the outcomes, and then they spur new thoughts. That's really worked well for me. I've always tried to label it like as get curious, just be more curious about it. But it's been fun because now you're more detached, or at least I find I'm more detached from the outcome, and I'm more interested in the experiment itself, regardless of what happens. But just like what kind of experiments can I come up with, and let's see what happens. And then the thing that actually that you touched on, which I didn't really relate to before, which was really cool that you brought it up. I found that one of the things I love most in life is seeing people on my team succeed. And so what times I've not fallen in love with my business, I fall in love with the watching the team win, seeing them get bigger bonus checks, and like helping them develop to be the best versions of themselves, providing for their families, growing their families. That's been a huge driver. I didn't really realize, like I kind of knew it, but I didn't know it in the context that you just mentioned. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that. And there's also the element of, if you're in a business, occasionally I meet entrepreneurs who are in a business where they say, everybody talks about how your business is supposed to have this compelling mission and vision, and everyone's supposed to get behind it. But my business is kind of like, we just don't have that. It's really just about the money. So how do I motivate my employees then? If I can't really tell them like, we're trying to build schools in Africa, or, save people from starvation. That's, it's nowhere close to that. So how do we motivate people? And I think a lot of it comes back to what you're talking about, Tyler, and that's a leadership skill that translates into productivity for a company, if nothing else, but also higher quality of life. If people have a sense of autonomy and mastery and connection in their work, they're far more likely to stick with the job they have. And that mastery element is something that, I don't know if you guys have ever researched kind of the history of Agora Publishing and how they kind of build the structure of their business. But one of the keys,
I didn't even know, like I'm very familiar with Agora, and they're probably one of the biggest in the space. I would love to hear this.
Yeah, so they really focus on giving people the opportunity to build their mastery. for whatever the skill is. And
Mhm.
so if you're a copywriter and you sense that everyone around you, your employees and your bosses, they value you mastering the craft, and they see that as part of your job, you show up at work with this excitement of, I'm going to get better and better and better at this. And again, it's partly that progress thing, right? I feel like I'm a better copywriter this week than I was last week. And similar to what you're saying about being like this curious scientist, like how can I get even better at being this scientist who discovers things through this testing process? You just get engaged in a different way. And so at Agora, they purposely give people opportunities to master things, but they also give them the autonomy to say, I'm a secretary, but I kind of want to try that copywriting thing. And because they like to promote from within, they say, we don't want you to ever go take a job anywhere else. Like whatever it is you want to do it here within our company. We have all of these different areas. Let's give you the opportunity to learn the skill. And if you can demonstrate that you now have competence enough to start at the bottom level, we'll move you over to that department. And then let's see your skills again, start building on that mastery.
Wow, that's so cool. For people who don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure Agora does over $1 billion a year in sales with a B.
Yeah, that's one of those things that if I did know, I wouldn't be at liberty to say it.
Gotcha.
Been very successful.
Yeah, they've been massive. So that's pretty cool. Awesome,
Very
man. That's
cool.
a cool little tidbit. That's great. Yeah, as we've grown too, like we've really had to invest in leadership and just mastering that skill, or at least improving at it. Because I found like what kind of, and I'm sure you heard this and we all have, but like what got you here won't get you there. And entrepreneurship, I think entrepreneurship in a lot of ways, like it's almost like an expression of art, because like whatever you want to create, you actually can. It's just a matter of like deciding what that is. And then, it can happen in the real world. But it's just always a constant game of evolving, getting better, knowing what you're strength at, or knowing what you're strong at, knowing what you're weak at, making sure you're hopefully doing more strengths than weaknesses. But it's definitely a constant opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah, it's the only game that you can play infinitely. There's no end.
Yeah, literally. And there's always like someone who's killing at some insane level, which just kind of sets the mark higher and higher.
Yeah.
So
Agreed. Well, that was a good one. Do you got any more questions,
awesome.
Tyler?
No. Nothing.
Love talking to you
Nice.
guys, but
Todd, where can the people reach you if they want to?
I don't have much presence. Most people find me through word of mouth, but toddsnydercoaching.com is my website. I do occasionally throw blog articles up there, and whatever other new things I might be doing. If you just want to get on my list so you hear what announcements if I'm doing something new. And Snyder's spelled SNYDER, so it's TOD.
We'll put a link below for you to make it easy for the people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And are you taking any clients on right now? Or you got a wait list?
I have a wait list.
Yeah.
Occasionally, I have some reason why somebody I know says, please take this person on, and I make an exception and bump somebody up. So yeah, but yeah, there's pretty much a long line of people I've started working with. They've just decided they want to keep working with me. And then there's people just ready to start. But, I do sometimes do short-term work with people, just kind of get them up and running for 3 months and then say, okay, my motivation's good. I'm fine for now. So that's where I do, if people want to hop on my waiting list, I'm happy for that, because then there's one more person that's trying to change the world that I get to walk alongside them and help them pursue their dream better.
Very cool.
Yeah. And I feel like it's probably well worth it, guys, because, like this could change your entire business in 3 months or a year, whatever you decide to do.
Change your entire life.
Oh, for sure. It's crazy. All right. Thank you for everyone listening today. For everyone watching, please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube. And for everyone listening, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. Oh, and Amazon. Forgot we're on Amazon. Who knew that's a thing? Anyway. All right. See you on the next one, guys. Thank you, Todd.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Take care.
Bye.